Welcome to the First Fight Podcast, episode 5, with a good friend of mine, Karl Reed. Welcome to the show, Karl.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. Glad to be here.
Karl is actually out here training with my husband, another giant man here. So I have a house full of guys right now. So I wanted to obviously take the time to get to know Karl and have him introduce you all to his first fight story. So, Karl, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Again, my name is Karl Reed. I train out of Simpsonville, South Carolina, at Upstate Karate Team Pitch Black MMA. A lot of people know us for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. That's my main training partner. Been my main training partner for the past 5 years, 4 or 5 years. I know Corey through college wrestling. We both wrestled at Newberry College in South Carolina. We were training partners down there. And then once Corey transferred out, went to his new school, which afterwards, he became a national finalist. We both didn't think we were going to end up fighting, and, we both ended up fighting. I'm still coaching college wrestling right now. It's funny, I moved down south. I'm originally from New Jersey. Corey moved to New Jersey. So now when I come home, or I come back up here to recruit or anything like that, I make sure I stop by his house, stay with him for about a week, and get some training in.
Awesome, Karl. So tell us how you got started in fighting.
It's funny, to be honest, I was never really introduced to fighting. When Corey transferred in from his junior college to Newberry, he used to box a lot. So the only first experience I've had striking or hitting anything, I was actually working with Corey. Corey was hitting some bags, the heavy bag, and he had some mitts, and he did one mitt session with me. But when I was in college, I had some guys telling me, I had some buddies taking fights. Kelly Anunson, he was a Bellator finalist. And the funny thing is, that's who Corey had to fight to get in the house.
Isn't that? Yeah, I thought Corey fought him.
Yeah, Corey fought him to get in the house for, the Ultimate Fighter. But he fought, and we had some other guys fighting amateur, and I had a guy that I used to ref for in South Carolina named Matt Perkle. He used to look at my body type and everything. He just said, man, you should, he seen me wrestle too. So he just said, dude, fighting is your sport. You need to fight. You need to do MMA afterwards. And I can be honest, I always no, I'm not doing that. That's not for me. So I was never really, looking to get into fighting. But fast forward, I wrestled, I graduated. As soon as I graduated, I went right into coaching. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a coach. So I got a GA spot, graduate assistant, meaning, they paid for me to get my master's, and I would coach for them. So I went to UNC Pembroke. I was there for about a semester because I graduated December 2012. So spring 2013, I was in UNC Pembroke, and I was just all in 110% coaching. I got an offer to take a full-time job down in South Georgia. At the time, my wife, then girlfriend, we were getting pretty serious. So I took the job, and I proposed to my now wife in Vegas at the time, and then we decided both to move to South Georgia to kind of, start our lives, together. We had no family down there. I prayed about it a lot, and I thought that's where we really wanted to start our life. So we went down to South Georgia, and I started coaching. I was a full-time assistant, finally getting a salary, getting some money. And the craziest thing happened. My second practice, I had a kid named Ben Richards. He had a heat stroke the second practice of the season, of preseason. Long story short, 2 weeks later, Ben passed away. So when Ben passed away, it just was a lot of stuff going on at the time with the school. A lot of media, a lot of stress, a lot, it was a really hectic time in my life. So, typically, when I'm stressed out, I would go wrestle, to blow off some steam. But wrestling was what was hectic at the time. It was wrestling. So I just rolled into a karate. It was actually funny. It was a karate school I rolled into. Okay. And the kids were doing karate. To tell you how mentally gone I was. Kids were doing karate, and I tried to do the kids class. I was talking to the owner. He's like, "Why don't you come back on Tuesday? They're doing jiu-jitsu." I didn't know what jiu-jitsu was. He's like, he was saying that'll be more your speed, do jiu-jitsu, you're a wrestler, jiu-jitsu be good for you. So I came back on Tuesday and I started doing jits. And those guys down there, they're pretty good. We're on the Hanato Tavares. He would come down often, and they would just use me as a big body. I had a good base for my wrestling. Didn't know much, but I got the rolling, and then 2 days out of the week, they would have me hit and kick stuff. And then we were like randomly spar, and I was naturally good. Like I was hitting all of them, you know what I mean? And I wasn't getting hit much. So I think, at that point I was like, because of what happened, I was in there, training, I really wouldn't call it training, but I was doing some MMA stuff.
Yeah.
I was, made me think back to Perkle. And, I said, let me call him up, see if I get a fight. So I gave him a call. He told me to come back to South Carolina. Perkle lived in South Carolina. So drove to South Carolina, stayed with him for a week. He took me to a couple gyms in the state and just kind of threw me out there, kind of see if I can handle my own. And I did well. He said, okay, I'll get you a fight. So he's like, I'll sign you up for your first amateur fight. So I guess I can say I really started training maybe February, March of 2014. Mm-hmm. But I really had no coaching. I found a boxing coach. I had no MMA coaching, The guy that I was training was traditional jiu-jitsu. I found a boxing coach in town, and he would just hold mitts for me a little bit, but, nothing too serious. Moving forward in the summertime, the school I was at, Darn State College, decided to drop a wrestling program. When they dropped the wrestling program, I moved back to South Carolina, started coaching at the school I'm coaching at now, Limestone College. We're D2, located in Gaffney, South Carolina. So when I moved back, to South Carolina, I had like 2 weeks for my fight. So I was at a gym called Revolution. I was there 2 weeks before my fight, and I took my first fight. I had no coaches in my corner or there with me. I pretty much just went by myself. It was me, my buddy Chris Noddy, and my wife. And I was fighting the hometown guy who was supposed to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and I thought it was awesome. So Perkle came to corner me. I thought it was awesome just because I was in enemy territory. Mm-hmm. And it was like a small little bar, and it was packed. I mean, it had to be like close to 1,000 people in this place. It was a new promotion in the area, so they were excited. I think it was about their third show. It was called Hard Play, and I get them the first fight on the card. Because I was 0-0 amateur. It was first fight on the card. I'm the first guy to walk out. As soon as I walk out, boos just rang. It's like booze is going everywhere. I get in the cage. He comes out. The place erupts, and it was so small and so jam packed. It was standing room only, and then I'm talking people on top of the cage, like to the exit. And it was so loud, like I couldn't hear my corner. I didn't know what the heck was going on. But the cage was shaking. But I was having fun. Like I loved it. I loved the environment. I loved the energy. I know when I wrestled in college, I always liked to be wrestling at home under the spotlight. And that's I got that feeling again. And going into the fight, the biggest thing I told myself was, I want to see if I can take a punch. If I can take a punch in live action, I was like, I'll keep fighting. I'll see about that. I'll keep fighting. So, fight started out, and coming in, everyone thought I was going to wrestle. For some reason, I was like, I'm going to strike. I'm not going to wrestle. I was like, I'm not going to wrestle heavy. I'm going to strike, and I stood and banged it out with him. Ended up winning a unanimous decision. But during the fight in the third round, I did get kicked in the face, flush. Like flush in the face, like moved me over like 2 feet. And my initial reaction, I smiled, I laughed, I clapped at him, and I went right back to fighting. So when I got done, I looked at Perkle, I looked at my buddy, I looked at my wife, and I was like, I think I'm gonna fight again. I love this stuff. And then fast forward, I got done. I found Upstate Karate, which is a little bit past Revolution, down the road. Ended up going there. I went to their gym. My first real gym really being at. I moved around on the mat one time. Got hooked up with Stephen Thompson, his dad. Ray Thompson was my head coach. They see me move one time and told me to keep coming back. I sparred with Steven the first time, and he proceeded to whoop my behind. I just kept coming back, kept fighting back, and they just would laugh at me, and they just said, dude, keep coming. Don't worry about anything. You keep coming. We're going to get you right. So, been sailing ever since.
So, going back to that first experience, were you nervous before the fight? Or was it, like, I've asked Ben Askren this, Tyron Woodley, Corey Anderson the same question because they're all high-level wrestlers. Was it different than competing in wrestling? Like, were the nerves different, or were you just an old pro at it by the time you got around to fighting?
I'll say this. You're always nervous when you're competing, especially in front of people. I think from my experience level competing, I was able to control it. You know, especially being in enemy territory and everyone just against you. Once you lose. I think at one time he rolled for a heel hook, and I heard someone in the crowd yell, like, rip his knee off. You know what I mean? But it's just, I embraced it. So for me, no matter if the crowd's with me or against me, I always embrace it. If it's against me, I got something to prove. If they're with me, now I'm really having fun. I'm having a good time. So the nerves were definitely there, but, from the wrestling experience, being able to control them was a little easier for me for my first fight.
You're probably, it sounds like it, but you're probably better at being present during the competition. I know I struggled with that in the beginning, and you see a lot of amateur fighters go out their first fight and they're just strictly reacting. It's just chaos, craziness. If you were able to strike being a wrestler, it shows that you weren't just reacting, I'm guessing.
No, actually I do, and this is something I'm working on now. I do better when I'm first. Like when I go and attack this, when you're kind of focusing on yourself, it's less stress on you. So I know I tried to do that, in college. So I tried to, I didn't know any better when I stepped into the cage. So, first thing I did, I marched straight forward. I was like, well, I'm going to try to get mine first before I get hit, and try to, instead of being, kind of like daring the headlights a little bit.
When you look back, do you think maybe you should have been more nervous about the experience?
I look back and I'm just like, what the heck was I doing? The funny thing is, man, I didn't even have like right equipment. Like my mouthpiece was like a Walmart mouthpiece. Like it didn't even fit in my mouth. So the whole fight I had that black and white tap out mouthpiece like hanging out of my mouth. It just was, oh my God, it was terrible. It just, everything I was doing just was no technique to it. I just was out there just pretty much just being an athlete.
Yeah, you all look back and you're really unpolished, obviously. You train at a really high level gym and with a high level partner now, which is amazing. But how has wrestling prepared you for this career?
It's great. So this is what I tell MMA is getting to be like the NFL for college wrestlers. College wrestlers, that blue collar sport, there's no NFL afterwards. There's no going pro afterwards unless you're going to try the Olympics. And even then, if you don't have the sponsors for it, if you're not one of the top guys with the sponsors, it's still tough, So for me, coming in and having my wrestling background, to transfer over into MMA, it was just great, man. I took all the matches, be able to handle the nerves and everything. It all comes together and all comes to fruition. So I tell my wrestlers now that tell me, I have guys coming in asking me, Coach, I want to fight afterwards. And the first thing I tell them, if you can get to a college wrestling career, you possibly be able to handle an MMA career.
Yeah.
And they'll always ask me, well, what's the difference? I'll say, look at it this way. I was like, you're in college, right? It's like me as a coach. I pay you in scholarship money to come wrestle for me. When we travel, I pay for your food. I pay for your lodging. I pay for your gear. I pay for your shoes. You know what I mean? I put your schedule together. I do all that stuff for you. It's like when you come into MMA, the roles reversed. You pay your coaches. You make sure your coaches eat. You make sure your coaches get taken care of. You know what I mean? You show up to your coaches, you ask your coaches, it's more, you got to be more self-driven, have a little more gratitude on this end. A lot of people I talk to says, the fighters are the nicest people. I think that comes from me and Karl Roberson was talking about this the other day. We just got so much gratitude because some of us come from nothing. And the amateurs, low level, pros, it's tough. It's not that much. One is no money in amateurs. Not that much money until you make it into the UFC, Bellator, what have you. You got to be really thankful for the people that's helping you out.
Yeah. It's a couple things. It's different in the sense that compared to other professional sports, that I don't know if it's just the nature or the structure of the business or that it's still newer, but there's not all these like feeder programs for the UFC. Like you can still come from nowhere and make it, I feel like it's harder to make it in fighting, but anyone can make it in fighting, as long as you have this certain skills and the recipe for success. Not anyone can be a pro football player. Like you have to be like groomed for that highest level, and we're not at that point yet. It's going to change obviously because the sport's evolving and kids are starting younger and younger, and the more it gets accepted, the more there are going to be these like feeder programs obviously. But right now you can really change your life in no time, really. And another thing that's different is that you are, for those of you who don't know, as a professional athlete, as a fighter, you're your own LLC. So you have to run your career like a business. It's not like you're just part of an organization. You are responsible for your career, your manager, but you're responsible for getting your manager and your coach and piecing together your camp. So there's a lot more that goes along with it that people don't really.
Yeah, it took me, it probably took me about 2 years to kind of start like really, like I'm 4-1. I'm a 4-1 pro. Like I'm just now starting to get my pieces together, like the right coaches for me. And you got to go through some trial and error, with that. And a lot of growing pains, to go along with that. I think that's what people don't see. They see the Conor McGregors, the Stephen Thompsons, and they think they just, come out of nowhere, And the funny thing, I was just watching Stephen's first MMA fight the other day, and boy, you want to talk about night and day?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know what made me watch it. Maybe because we were going to do this podcast, but I was, let me see what Stephen looked like his first fight, his first MMA fight in the beginning. And it was like, he was standing straight up. He got taken down by I can't remember who the guy's name was. It was pretty bad. He won, of course, but it was.
That's why I love this, because I think it's applicable to everything, not just for fighting, but it's really cool to see and inspiring to see that everybody had a first day. Everyone had a first fight, even, high level guys, champions. A lot of them went through that same experience, that same learning process, and were afraid when they started, because I don't care what anyone says, it's a scary thing to do. Yeah. And I like hearing like the biggest, baddest guys talk about how they were scared. Maybe that's my motivation. Yeah. But that's the coolest part about it, and it's how you weather that storm and learn from it. A lot of those people, I say this all the time, there's a huge disconnect between the fans and the athletes, the most in MMA, because your average Joe doesn't know a lot about MMA. They don't know the lifestyle that's required to do the 1% that they actually see, which is glamorous, Yeah. And not everyone thinks they can be, Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, but every man thinks he can fight. I don't care where you are.
Oh,
it's just
God.
Innate. I can't explain it. They don't understand that these people are high-level athletes, and this might be a controversial thing to say, but I think they work harder than any other professional athlete there is, and they are by far not paid enough in comparison either for what they're sacrificing.
100%. I hate it. I can't say I hate it, but one of the biggest pet peeves I have is like if I'm watching fights and you got that guy, you got that fight party, and you got that one or two guys that's just like, why don't he just get up? Why don't he just do this? And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, I'm just like cracking my knuckles. I was like, dude, let me hit you over the head real quick and put you down in a corner and let me see how fast you get up.
It's so, and I've done athletics my whole life, and I've struggled with performing on the spot. It's one thing learning how to do these things, but being able to perform is another skill in itself, and performing when it counts. And I think it was Giles Sonnen that said it, like, training versus fighting. Training is like walking across a board, and fighting is putting that board 20 feet in the air and walking across it. They're two completely different things. And I completely agree with him, because I've explained this many times, but when you're out there for the first time, at least for me, it was such a shock, because I just felt like time is different out there. Like,
yeah,
it's different when someone is coming at you with everything they have. Yeah, this throw might be easy in practice when someone knows you're gonna do it, but in a fight, it's like, it's fighting a body that's fighting you.
I feel like you get you ever play like video games where you're like point of view mode, like,
yeah,
that's what I feel like when I'm fighting. I'm like, I'm in like point of view mode, and that's what I say. I see this figure in front of me that's just like throwing things, and it's like, learn to get comfortable in there. And the more and more I am fighting, the more and more I am starting to get comfortable, and I'm starting to understand, my niche. Like, you see me train with Corey, and I'm a karate guy, I'm an outside guy, but one thing I told myself with this trip, let's go up here, let's get better at some weaknesses, so I didn't move as much when I came up here this trip, and I paid for it, but that's gonna pay dividends later. Hopefully next time I step in the cage, stuff look even slower to me. And I think a lot of guys that just sit back, they don't realize, like, we go through that stuff, man. Like you said.
It's not even being willing, like anything in life, you have to be willing to fail to get better at something. But not only are you having to be willing to fail, but you're willing to have the repercussions. Because when you fight, you fail at something, you get hurt. You get hit in the face,
Yeah.
So there's two bad things that happen. You fail and you get beat up at the same time. So it takes a special kind of person to be able to reach out, try new things, put their ego on the line. I mean, ego is, I think, the biggest issue, the biggest obstacle to overcome when it comes to fighting.
I think that's the biggest fear everyone has, just going out there and getting embarrassed. I think that's the biggest fear more than anything else. You know what I mean? The fear of not knowing. Me now, as I'm, progressing in my career and, doing more mental study. And for me now, is just all about performing. I know if I go out there and I compete my hardest, I know I'm tough to beat. Mm-hmm. So I put my in training, I put myself in crappy situations. You know what I mean? And, I try to survive. I try to not only survive, and then win in a crappy situation. And I know if I can do that in training, the fight's going to be a little bit easier. And again, that stuff, people don't see. They think we go in there in training and it's a good time and it's easy going. And, then we go, boom, we go and fight. But no, like, me and Corey was hurting today,
You're constantly being broken down physically and mentally. When you're training this much, I used to have days where I would do 5 rounds in a row grappling and get my ass kicked every time by someone stronger than me every time, and I'd be like, why am I doing this? Like, I suck. I'm not good at, everyone has those days, and then you have a day you feel really good, and then I have usually 2 more where I feel like shit. It's always like 2-to-1 ratio, but you're getting better. That's the thing. I teach a lot of people, and it's funny, they get frustrated the first day, like they're supposed to get it the first day, and I always tell the girls, I'm like, if I showed you and this probably might scare them, but like if I showed you a picture of every bruise and bump I've gotten doing this along the way, you'd be floored. And I still suck. Like it's an art. You know, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. If you think you're going to get this right in one day, you're arrogant, honestly.
Yeah. I try to do what I try to do. You know, me being a college wrestling coach now, it's helping me so much in my career because I always got to help my guys when they hit those plateaus. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's big for me. So understanding that myself, I think is the reason why I'm getting as good as, you know, getting good as fast as I am. You know, one thing I do, like for example, today you saw me working inside, like I look for sparks. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if I can see a spark, like when I'm coaching an athlete and, you know, I don't know nothing about the kid, he's a blue collar kid, I'm looking for talent. I look for sparks in the room. Mm-hmm. If I can see a spark, and maybe he's, you know, 9 times out of 10, he's getting tossed across the room. But if I see one spark, you know, immediately me as a coach, like, man, if we can get that spark to stay lit, it's like he's going to be on another level, you know? So I think about that in my own training, you know? So today I'm working inside, and one time, you know, I'm working inside, which is really not my forte. I'm a karate guy. I like to fight outside. So I'm working inside with the number 8 light heavyweight in the world, you know, and he's tagged me, and one time I block and rip. And I'm like, to me, like, there's a spark.
You got to take your little victory.
You know what I mean?
When you can.
Exactly. And that's what I tell my wrestlers. You know, I tell them, like, you know, focus on the small details. Don't focus on the whole big picture right now. You know, keep focused on the small things. Like when I first started training with Steven, you know, he's the best striker in the world, in my opinion. Trying to be totally unbiased, but I think he's the best striker in the game. You know, I don't hit him often. You know, so when I first started training, I never counted, you know, I only count how many times I'm successful. So if we're going to a 5-minute round and I'm saying this round, listen, I'm really just going to work my jab. And I only hit Steven 3 times, I'm excited. And next time we go, okay, I'm going to try to hit him 3 or 4 times now. You know, I don't, in between all that, I'm getting punched in the face, kicked in the leg, side kick, you know, spin thrust, kicked, all that's going on. But I'm like, hey, I'm working my jab this round. You know, how much better did I get on my jab? Okay, next round, did I get better or did it stay the same? You know, that's what I focus on.
Structure your training, which that comes with time. Not everyone realizes that, but otherwise it's just chaos and you're not getting better. There's no organization to what you're doing. At least for me, I like to be really structured in my thought process, but I believe it all comes down to your perception. I realized I had to change my perception because in the beginning I would spar, I'd get hit once, I'd be like, ugh, I'm losing.
Exactly. I was
like
the
that
same
black
way.
And white thinking. If you're a perfectionist, it's hard because you want to be perfect in everything, and there's a million things going on at once when you're sparring or fighting someone. It's chaos, and you try to find some organization in it, but I learned that if I start thinking, oh, I'm losing because I get hit once, my mindset's going to completely change, and I'm going to start sparring like I'm
snowball effect.
I'm losing, like I'm a loser. I'm not going to win this. And the reality of it is, especially in MMA, things can change in a second. And if I learn anything, it all comes down to that 10%. Like 90% of it is the technique, your training, blah, blah, blah. But that 10% is closing the gap, finishing, connecting, you know, like knowing when to pull the trigger, the mental toughness to pull through a tough situation. That is the difference between winning and losing. And sometimes you have no control over it either. Sometimes you just lose, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard to wrap your mind around it. Like what you can change. There's always these little, like they say, it's a game of inches. There's little things you could change that would change the outcome, but achieving perfection is never going to happen, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're all chasing, that perfect performance. Mm-hmm. You know, in my last fight, I knocked the guy out in 47 seconds, but I look at my video and I said, you know, a couple times he swung, I slid too far out of the way. I could have slid half a step, you know, a half inch less and be able to counter. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm looking at that with 47 seconds. Mm-hmm. A 47-second fight, you know, we're chasing that perfection. You know, that's that's the sad part about athletes, especially ones in our sport. It's never good enough.
To me, it's an art. I compare it to being an artist because, and I don't know if everyone else looks at it like this, but my goal is to create something effective, but something that has like a style that looks nice, incorporates everything that needs to be incorporated. And a real artist is supremely insecure with their final product usually.
Exactly.
It's like never good enough. There's a quote that, how does it go? It's like, complete confidence is granted to the less talented, basically. Like, I feel like the more talent you have, sometimes the more knowledge you have, the more you tend to question your abilities. And for me, I always ask people, how do you find a balance between being aware of your faults and your shortcomings and being confident? Because in fighting, you have to be confident.
100%.
Right?
I think that just comes from your game plan with your coaches. For me personally, I know this last fight, the guy was, he's like 6'5", 85-inch reach, and I know I have a bad habit of, when guys, I have a bad habit sometimes when guys are approaching me, I lean back instead of shuffling back sometimes. So if I lean back with a tall guy like that, I may miss the first one, but I put myself in a position where I can't move again. So the second one is definitely going to land. Mm-hmm. So, one thing for that fight was, okay, we're going to go forward more. We're not going to play side to side and backwards, like I did in some of my fights. Mm-hmm. So let's hide that mistake that I'm making until we fix it completely in the gym. Mm-hmm. I think that, I think that's what you got to do. I think like a perfect example is like Tyron Woodley versus Steven. I thought, fight one, I thought, Woodley Thompson won. I thought, and I'm saying this because in Steven's mind, Thompson's my training partner, and I love him to death, so I'm totally biased. And, I sat in here with you one day last year when I was like, I just don't see how he beat Steven. Like, I can't, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I just don't see it. And they came away with the greatest game plan for Tyron to hide his faults versus Steven. I thought it was genius. As soon as the fight was over, I was like, that was the most brilliant game plan for Steven ever put together. Mm-hmm. You see a guy who's always countering guys, so Tyron says, well, I'm not going to come forward. You're going to have to come get me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then have the mental stability and confidence to put his back against the cage, against his best striker in the game, and wait and try to out-counter the counter striker. I thought that was amazing.
Chess match.
Yeah, definitely a chess match, and I thought it was great. I know some other stuff, I'm not going to speak on, but I thought that in that sense, that game plan, that base game plan right there, I thought it was amazing. I think that hits on what you were talking about,
So you would say your team gives you confidence?
Yeah.
Knowing you have the right people around you.
Definitely. Right people, right coaches, right game plan, and preparation is the biggest thing. I know me and Corey talking about.
Would definitely say. 100%.
100% preparation. Like, I always feel prepared, like I feel like me personally, I train with the best guys in the world. I got Stephen Thompson down there in South Carolina, arguably one of the best strikers in the game. Then I come up here to Jersey with my buddy Corey, and he's got the biggest pace in the light heavyweight division. Mm-hmm. He's close to having the most takedowns. He's throwing the most strikes. He throws the most strikes as a lightweight. You know what I mean? No other guy is doing it. So if I can come here, if I can come here, circle Corey's pressure off sometimes and pressure him back, if I can strike with Stephen Thompson, what are the rest of these guys going to do to me? You know what I mean?
It's amazing what they say, you rise or fall to your level of preparation, and it's 100% true. And I tell myself this before fights to hype myself up, and I tell other people this, like, you've done it all. Like, your body is just going to do what it does, I watch clips sometimes, I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, I just did it,
That's that small snippet of flow.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm striving to to find that calm in the chaos, obviously.
I'm getting there. I felt it. I've been feeling it in my last couple fights. My second to last fight, I felt it a little bit, but then I knocked myself out of it, and then I had to find it back in the fight. This last fight only lasted 47 seconds, but I was definitely in it for that 47.
It's that presence, and I mean, my last fight, I felt like I was too calm, like I was watching things happening. I was too slow. So I've gotten to the point where I'm not as afraid as I used to be. But now it's just learning how to turn it on and pull the trigger, because you get too relaxed and passive, and obviously things are happening to you. You're not happening to things.
And sometimes, I think everybody struggles with that, because I struggled with that a lot in training because I'm such a thinker.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I like to say I don't think much when I fight. I try to just let my body take over. But when I'm training, I'm such a thinker. So I get hit so much, especially when I'm trying new stuff. I get hit so much because I don't have fun with it. I'm like, okay, he's about to do this, so I got to do this. I'm thinking the whole time. So then it's like, boom, 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 I'm getting hit. But in the fight, I guess I realize, I tell myself, like, when I go to the fight, don't think, just do.
Yeah. I mean, I have that problem 100%. It's interesting to see the different types of fighters by the way they view fighting in the world. There's definitely some more perfectionists and thinkers. I've been criticized, by coaches for thinking too much.
I get that too. Now my new thing is, since I've been working, I work with martial arts mindset and wrestling mindset, one of their coaches, and that's helped me so much. Just helping, hearing different stories of people with their mental struggles, and I'm trying to help them, put mental game plans together. One thing I'm starting to notice is you're battling yourself. There's no opponent. 110%. It's like whatever the situation is, if you're a trained athlete, I feel like you should know what to do in every situation. I feel like you shouldn't move to the next step. And me personally, I feel like you shouldn't move from amateur to pro until you know what to do in every situation, or know something to do in every situation where you can just react. Now, trust me, there's levels to that, but until you get to that point, I don't think you should turn pro. But once you have that, I feel like now it's the battle's yourself. You know what to do in every situation, So now it's, are you going to do it when you have to do it, And
I usually do it, but it's too slow,
Yeah.
It's like flipping the switch. It's hard sometimes.
It's definitely tough, and you got to find that happy, that happy medium with yourself. And, so sometimes some things I say to myself in training, when I start to get tired, or, something's not working out, I tell myself, I'm going to beat you. Because I know I'm starting to get in, sometimes you just get into that negative spiral a little bit, so I just tell myself, I'm going to beat you. You're not going to do this today. I'm going to have a good training session. I'm going to have a good go. Like, or anytime something negative pops in my head, I just immediately, we had a sports psychologist come to our wrestling team one time. And I took this from him, and I use it to today. Anytime something negative pop into my head, I just say no, or I say stop.
Yeah, shutting it down.
Yeah, I'll shut it down. Then I'll replace it with a positive, and I'll just move forward. Give a good gesture, a confidence gesture. That's what we call it in martial arts mindset. Mine's a little fist pump. So it's like, negative thought, stop. I got this. Fist pump, I got this. I'm the best in the world. Let's go. All me, all day. So those are just confident words and confidence cues that, that I know, my coaches know, that if I ever feel flustered or anything, or they see that I'm flustered, all I got to hear is those certain words, and I'm back right. So I think another thing people got to start doing is, really training their mind, to be in the right place at the right time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as we're trying to show you, it's more than just punching and kicking. So, I mean, we could go on forever on this subject, but I appreciate you coming on the show and delving a little bit into the mindset aspect of it. To me, that's the most complicated aspect of it and the hardest to overcome. So I appreciate that, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, your future fights. Is there anyone you'd like to shout out before you sign off?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to thank you guys, the Andersons, for letting me sleep in your spare room while I'm here this week, or in any other
here.
Your clubhouse here. Every time I come off the train, in Jersey, you guys are always welcoming. So I definitely appreciate that. Me and Corey's been, good friends since college. So, and it's just, yeah, it's awesome that we're both, on this level. Definitely want to thank Health Athletic Meals. My sponsor back in South Carolina, provided me meals when I come out here to train and during training camp. And the fight doctors, they handle my weight cut, my rehydration just for training. All my team back in Pitch Black MMA. Josh Reynolds Strong, my strength and conditioning coach. Checkmate Charlotte. Michael Allen helps me with my grappling, and Big Phil helps me with my boxing. So I just want to thank all of them, just my coaches, that just, helps me to get to where I want to be at.
Takes a village.
Definitely a village.